Alright, what's going on, everybody? I just figured I'd try my hand at some of this commentary stuff using some old footage from Dark Souls Remastered and see if this got any traction. I'm in the Tomb of the Giants at the moment, using the head lantern in order to navigate. My character isn't spec'd into intelligence whatsoever. This is my classic Soul level 125 build, using the Silver Knight Straight Sword, Knight Armor, Wanderer Leggings, Elite Knight Helmet, and the Gauntlets. Unfortunately, I think due to the weight of that lantern, I was not able to equip my helmet, so in order to continue my fast rolling, I had to unequip that. So, this build is 30-30, Dexterity and Strength. I believe I have 30 in stamina and 25 in vitality. I believe I'm using the Ring of Favor and Protection and the Hobbles Ring. When I come up here, I'm going to end up doing some battle with Paladin Leroy, as I actually happen to be human going through this section. There's that crystal lizard. I believe I managed to catch it. Yeah, and, you know, that's them straight swords for you, too. Twinkling Titanite. I'm using the Crest Shield because while it doesn't have the greatest stability, it actually is, in terms of blocking any kinds of magical attacks, it's actually one of the best, in my opinion. Plus, it still has 100% shield blocking of physical attacks. So I go for the two-hand right there, and I'm able to, excuse me, you know, go ahead and send Leroy off to wherever it was he came from. So I'm going to continue making my way through here, doing my best to avoid the nonsense that I'm sure we are all aware exists in the Tomb of the Giants. These guys typically don't cause me a whole lot of problems, but it looks like I got hit there. Using some of those R2s on the Silver Knight Straight Sword, by far my favorite weapon in that game. Yep, so I'm using the... Actually, I was wrong. I'm using the Solaire's Helm. This is kind of my own Fashion Souls thing I cooked up. Unfortunately, in order to get this helmet, you do have to kill everybody's favorite Sunbro, so I in advance, I apologize for that. This I do remember. Those skeleton columns, man, if you allow them to, they will 110% wreck your shit if they get that move right there off. Most of the time, my strategy with them is just sort of out DPS them. That way, they're not able to pull that move off or just simply run by. So there's another one of these skeleton columns right here, and to the left is one of those skeletons that will, or can and will, boot you off that ledge if you allow them to. I just go ahead and ignore them. Now there's a whole lot of, I can't remember the name of the boss, Pinwheel. There's a whole bunch of like mini pinwheels in here, and they're all basically a waste of your time. They don't drop anything, but you know, it is kind of interesting to see. I always like it when the Souls games take an enemy that you fought as a boss and place it as just a mob later on in the game. It really helps with that progression and essentially, you know, showing you that yes, you are indeed stronger. I feel like a lot of the strength of that message they're trying to portray ends up becoming lost on you just because, I mean, it's Pinwheel, and Pinwheel, you know, you could beat, you know, the moment you get out of the asylum. Typically, in order to get the Rite of Kindling, I was sort of trying to hazard my way through, you know, at least the beginning of the catacombs. That way I can go ahead and acquire the Rite of Kindling so I can get the 20 Estus flasks. So now I'm going to go ahead and face off against Gravelord Nito. Unfortunately, you suffer a bit of falling damage no matter what you do. There is kind of a way to kite it by hitting the pause button when you get down there, but unfortunately it looks like my timing was a bit off. So I go ahead and buff. This is a faith build. I believe I've got 30 faith, so I'm using lightning spears, lightning blade, and I can't remember if I have dark moon on this, but I very well might. So that Crest Shield really helped me out right there, because it blocks a lot of magic, a lot of dark, along with being you know, a relatively stable shield, you know, by far not the best. So this explosion attack, you definitely want to move and not get hit by that. A lot of the times the iframes and the fast roll you can use to circumvent a whole lot of that. These swords that come out of the ground, those can be a little rough, especially if you're not paying attention. So I go ahead and try to get the ring swap, but it looks like I'm not really getting there. Yeah, I'm trying to make sure I don't lose my souls, and now that I think about it, it's only 13,000 souls. I'm not really sure why I did that, but yeah, I go ahead and I get mobbed out right there, and I'm dead. So, I get the rare ring revival. I think it was because I didn't want to waste the humanity. I wanted to stay human, but I'm actually not wholly certain as to why I did that. But, so right here, I'm sitting here, and I remember this. I was just kind of thinking, like, great, like, of course I did that. Well, let me go ahead and get rid of these souls, you know, while I'm here. That way, oh, it looks like I'm 105, so I think I was getting somewhere, and you can see my stats right there. That's generally speaking what I was going for. The bow doesn't really mean a whole lot. I typically don't use the bow a great deal unless I'm fighting mobs, you know, trying to pull certain ones from locations. That way I don't get overwhelmed. But you know, I use the black bow of Ferris just because of the bow's inherent range. I could definitely, for quite some time, I could definitely nerd out on, you know, all the proclivities and all of the really interesting details of Dark Souls itself. Like, a lot of this, like, this clip is old, and, you know, this commentary is probably, you know, 6-7 months later, but, you know, I still remember a whole great, you know, I still remember a whole great deal of this. So, looks like, I'm not under-leveled, but it looks like I'm kind of on par, maybe a little low in terms of going and facing down Gravelord Nito. But yeah, I mean, if you guys can let me know in the comment section if this is something that you want to see more of, if you want to see more Dark Souls stuff, I'd be more than happy to. I've been thinking about getting another playthrough going, maybe on Remastered or Scholar of the First Sin, or even 3. It's been on my mind lately, so I don't think I would mind doing and posting a full playthrough of any of those 3. I believe I get invaded here, but rather than try and face off against the invader like I normally would, I think I was just trying to beat this boss. I typically don't like doing invasions or participating in invasions. Yeah. In the Tomb of the Giants, just because of how hectic of an area it can be. And typically I try to, I generally speaking, I try to get out of the Tomb of the Giants as soon as possible. Once you get to like Lost Izalith and stuff, I really like facing invaders in places like Lost Izalith or Anorlando, but I tried to get out of the Tomb of the Giants and the Catacombs really as soon as possible. It's really an area that I'm not a very big fan of. Yeah, I tried to do the whole pause thing again. That way I could try and circumvent that damage. But I'm really not. I don't appear to be getting the timing down. But it might have been patched in the remaster. I don't remember. But there was sort of a way to circumvent that fall damage. So here we go again, facing off against Gravelord Nito. I'm getting wrecked by the mobs before I've even, you know, made an attempt at attacking him. I believe I died twice before I finally defeat him. Yeah. So I believe on this attempt I also die. But yeah, I basically got stomped while, you know, facing off against the mobs, unfortunately. But that's really just the nature of Dark Souls. You know, sometimes it's great triumph and sometimes it's great failure. So, you know, I really try not to allow myself to get, you know, angered by that. Yeah, I believe this is a New Game Plus playthrough, just judging by the way that my inventory looks. I've got several Skull Lanterns, plus 15 Balder Side Sword. unfortunately, I've tried to use the, yeah, and I die right there. But I've tried to use the Balder Side Sword, or the Baller Swag Sword, whatever nomenclature you know it as. But I have never had great success with it. I know a lot of people that really enjoy it. I know a lot of people that glean a lot of victories from it, and I really don't. It's something about the pokes, the piercing moves. Like I've attempted to use it with the Leo ring in terms of like counterattacking and things like that, but it just doesn't. The cons unfortunately outweigh the pros, and at least in my opinion, it just doesn't work for me. But the Silver Knight Straight Sword, I've had great success with it. The R2s don't necessarily render themselves, very applicable when it comes to comboing or anything like that. But I do believe that when it does come time to utilize those, I can, to at least some degree, combo them at least well enough. And I think that the reach is just a little bit better than the longsword. I'm not a big fan of the thrust attacks. I typically tend to do a lot better with sweeping attacks, which is why the broadsword, for quite a while, even with its abysmal reach, was not really my forte. So I'm going in here what looks like a little under equipped, but I'm using the Canvas Talisman and the Heal Miracle. Typically, in at least Dark Souls 1, I will usually stay with the Heal Miracle, because Great Heal is, if I recall correctly, is a little too high for my faith. But like my faith is not quite high enough for Great Heal, or something about the uses you get out of it, 2 or 3, something of that nature. So I go ahead and go in here with Sanctus, to try and get some of that health regen. Or actually, no, I go back to my Crest Shield. But the Canvas Talisman, for anybody who's not very familiar with miracle builds, the Canvas Talisman, when you're at Faith level 30, is far and away the best talisman to use. Usually I'll run the Thorland Talisman before I acquire the Canvas one, just because it has a fixed magic adjustment, so it doesn't matter what your faith is, the Thorland Talisman is going to do a certain amount. So I will typically roll with that one, because it's just the Talisman, the Thorland Talisman, and then the Canvas Talisman are really the only ones that are worth anything until you get to level 30 faith, because things like the Sunlight Talisman and other items such as that are just not as effective when you're doing yeah, I take a big hit there. But those other items are just not as effective. Like the Sunlight Talisman isn't really very good. It doesn't have the best adjustment rate until you've hit, Faith 45, and that's just not very good for, my purposes, unfortunately. So I'll go ahead and see if I can get some use out of the Balder Side Sword. Basically, I'm not even going for any R2s, I don't believe. I was just simply going to R1. Yeah. Just to go ahead and get some DPS out. Yeah, looks like I went for a couple R2s. Try to get it in 2 hands. At one point I was using the Falchion and things like Dark Moon Blade, Sunlight Blade, because you can get a whole lot of damage out all at once. But that's not a very, at least in my opinion, that's not a very fun strategy. I'm not a great fan of that. So fortunately, because I used that Silver Knight Spear and it's got that Divine modifier, I was able to defeat those skeletons and not have to really worry about them while fighting Nito. So it really takes a lot of that, and I avoided going to the other side of the boss area to avoid dealing with those other skeletons that would activate, and it essentially made this boss fight a piece of cake. So any questions, shoot me a message, and if you enjoyed this, drop me a like and let me know if you want to see more. Have a good one, everybody.